All right, welcome. We're going to give people a few more seconds to join here, and then we'll get going. Speaking of changing the channel, Jim, the news is reporting more snow coming our way this weekend, so I changed that channel.
Yeah, we're supposed to get a lot starting tomorrow, so we're we're stocking up on the provisions.
Yeah, yeah. I'm about done with shoveling the walkways and the driveway and etc. But guess we still got a lot of winter left.
February is very snowy in Chicago, so
Yeah,
it's the
seems to
big
be
snow
the
month here.
yeah, it seems to be the same here. All right, well, grab your remotes. We're going to talk about when to change the channel, specifically the internal communications channel, and how to get your content in the right place at the right time. Uh, my name is Michael DeRoche, and I am managing director of Playmail. And joining me again today is Jim Wysella, co-founder of Reagan Consulting. Welcome again, Jim.
Michael, great to be with you again. We got a lot to talk about today. I'm excited about it.
Awesome. All right. Just a couple housekeeping items. We are doing a recording, so if even if you're watching, you'll still receive the recording, and anyone that signed up that didn't attend will also be able to watch it at their leisure. Um, at the conclusion, Reagan Consulting has put together a best content for the each channel guide, and you'll be receiving that. And all recipients are muted. There's no open discussion, but we do have the Q&A feature, which allows you to type in a question. We're happy to take questions as we go through. So feel free to type those in, and we'll try to touch on those as we go through the presentation. All right, and my stupid forward button's not working, but we got a couple of quick surveys to do. So a couple polls here. The first one is, do you use opens and page views? So those are kind of the easy to get metrics that you get if you're doing email measurement or intranet measurement. And oftentimes that's what we see that, that's the start, but sometimes it's the end as well. Um,
Yeah, that's right, Michael. We see that a lot as well. Relying, we think, a little too much on opens and page views, and we need to go deeper to find out more so that we can improve the content we're putting together. And the other thing we need to do is to, see how the channels are comparing to each other. Are there channels that get a lot of traffic versus those that don't? And why is that? I mean, we need to explore why. Either maybe the channel's not working the best as it should, or we're not connecting with people the way we want to, or it could be the content. What can we do to make the channel, more palatable to the audience because of what we put in it? So
I mean,
be
they're not all
interested in
equal.
I don't think they're all equal, but we'd like them to all work well and what they're made for. That's part of the download we'll be sending out to everybody is, just what is the best content for each channel and how can you make sure you integrate them, use them together. So I think people are taking the poll. It says at the bottom that we can't vote, so we'll see what the results are. Um, I think that um, there are new channels all the time that come up, and sometimes when we're doing audits, those don't get really high marks at the beginning because they're new. And I think you can't necessarily make a judgment about that until some time passes. Um, Early on in the days of video, there was not all that many people using it. Now, of course, video is all the rage. although we think that has changed as well. But just have to kind of keep track of of what you're using and how it's working and how some of these channels are changing.
That seemed to be the case with Teams too. Like early on, pre-pandemic period, it was a little slow on the uptake, and then all of a sudden, bam, everyone
Right.
was right on it. And even still, like I think it's a popular popular channel or platform within our own company.
Yeah, we're finding that too. And here are the results. Well, that's interesting, Michael, that 84% say that they are relying primarily on opens and page views. I think we kind of suspected that that might be the case.
Yeah, we got some work to do.
Got some work to do there. I mean, it's not that those are terrible metrics, but they are sort of foundational metrics. And I think part of what we'll talk about today is how we get beyond those. Um, Now, I'm pleasantly surprised by the answers to the second question because people really are measuring 58% said they are measuring the effectiveness of each channel, kind of comparing that. And I think, again, that's a very important thing to do because you can't just take a piece of content and just throw it into every channel. It has to work for the channel. So good stuff there.
Right. We got those down.
So part of what we're going to do today is, we're sort of taking measurement to kind of a new level by looking at the three pieces of it that really matter. Um, the first is listening. What are employees saying about the channels? We do that through surveys, focus groups, interviews, personas. So we get a sense from the audience, and we're going to present you with some examples from some recent audits that tell you what the audience is saying. And then, of course, the metrics themselves. What do they tell you? And again, moving beyond just opens and click throughs or views, and how do we look at some of those other important metrics like attention and read time, and whether people are actually acting on those on that content. And then the third thing is, to take the first two and think, okay, based on what I've learned, am I am I doing it right? Am I putting the right content and I'm making the content attractive for the channel? Am I thinking about things like how long it is and the voice I'm using and what style I'm creating it? You put all those things together, Michael, and I think you've got some pretty good evaluation of internal comps.
All right. We can start with the question, right? This is when you're doing your audits, kind of where you start.
We start a lot by asking just level of satisfaction. Yeah, it's the big picture question. Just to kind of set some kind of a line of, okay, well, where do we stand in general? And I think we have a couple of examples here. These are two different audits. And the one on the left, see that the strongly agree and agree is about 53% when you add them together. So slightly more than half, which is not great. We would expect overall satisfaction to be higher than that. About just under 20% disagree. But I want to, draw your attention to the neutral bar. This is something when we do surveys, looking at survey data, we look at the neutrals quite a bit. This is like 1 out of 4 people just aren't sure which way they want to go. We see those people as, kind of sitting on the fence, but we see neutral answers as opportunity to move those people to the positive side of the ledger because these are anonymous surveys. If they really thought it was awful, they'd probably say so. But it's not quite enough for them to say, "Yeah, I'm satisfied." So that's you get half of those people to move to the positive side, and then you're seeing some pretty good satisfaction numbers. Same thing with the one on the right, very similar, and these are numbers are even worse. There you got 39% who are satisfied. That's underwater. That's not where we want to be. And the disagree numbers are kind of high. That's 30%. That's way too many. Anything over 20. Um, and we look for like 10 to 20. 10 is the best of some people just aren't going to like the stuff, but you start to get 30%, that's high. And again, here we have a third of the people who are sitting on the fence, can't make up their mind. So, we like to that kind of gives us kind of a baseline for what we're looking at. And here's another way we sort of look at overall satisfaction. This is a relatively new measure, sort of coming out of COVID, but and maintaining to this day that some people are on site and some people are remote and more people are working hybrid. Does that have any impact at all on how people are feeling about that, on their level of
And apparently it
satisfaction?
does. Apparently it's I'm so kind of surprised by the hybrid and remotes feeling higher satisfaction than internal.
We were surprised by this too, Michael, when we first came across it. And then when we talked to people, we found out that, well, since so much internal comms is digital, if you're working at home, you're sitting in front of a computer. If you're hybrid, you're sitting in front of a computer, either at home or at the office. A lot of on the people who are left who have to be there every day, whether they're in factories or they're nurses or they're out in the field or what have you, their level of satisfaction is significantly lower. This is a big finding that we have come across now pretty regularly. So we have to pay attention to those people who are actually on the job, on site, and what are their needs? How can we reach them better?
And do you think did most of those people consider like direct manager communications to be internal communications, or do they, I'm wondering if how they perceive that term might influence the ratings.
Yeah, and we do ask about that, and yes, a lot of those people really rely on their managers. But even then, even for the on-site people, the manager communications can sometimes fall off again because maybe those people are the hard to reach folks. Um, the other thing that comes up is, are we communicating too much, Michael? Are we, you know, years ago it was like, you're not telling us anything, we're not receiving enough information. Well, we solved that problem quite a while ago by inundating employees. And this isn't just about email, this is everything that we're throwing at them. And you can see from this chart, you got almost half the people saying, whoa, uh, too much. That's too much. Somebody asks in the Q&A, by the way, where are these stats coming from? These are actual audits that Reagan Consulting has performed over the last several years.
Yeah, and then this is some data from our, polite mail email data that just kind of shows, what the email volume looks like on average, right? Basically, it's, the hundreds of customers, millions of emails, but no one sends average, but in general, this is where the averages fall out, right? There's 61 unique messages, over 30,000 words, 30 minutes of reading. And some people will get a lot more than this, and some people will get a lot less. We're kind of normalizing this based on number of employees. Not every internal communication is an all employee broadcast. So there'll be segments of the audience that get a lot more, segments that get less, but that's still, you're asking, asking people to read half an hour, but you're also the communicators are producing a lot of content.
Yeah, that is a lot. 61 messages. Ooh.
And in terms of that too much feedback, I mean, we've all heard the email overload, like getting too much. Uh, our take on the data, as messages get longer, you can kind of see the readership. We track, how long people spend with the message versus how much content is there. So that's the percent read. And you can see is when the messages are short, each of those bars is 30 seconds. That percent read bar just declines. And we did a little more detailed analysis on the right-hand side with the trend line. Basically, for every 250 words of content, you're losing 10% of your readership. So our take on this is the email overload is less about volume of messages, but more about the length of messages, right? If people get even a relatively small volume of long messages, it becomes a lot to get through and just contributes to that overwhelm.
Yeah, I think this is a really significant stat because one of the things that you need to look at when we talk about what content you're putting in what channel is, how much should you put in email? And frankly, I mean, email is a very powerful and very useful channel, but if it's too long, just like your chart shows, you're gonna lose people.
Yeah, we also kind of looked at like what is that content? We kind of looked at just, let's look at messages that just fit into that preview window in Outlook, right? The default window size will fit about 125 words. That's depending on images, but this chart really just shows you that the text matters more, what it says matters more than what the image is. And most people will send preview content that's mostly images, but what people are paying attention to more of is the text.
Yeah, words. We have a couple more questions that have popped in, Michael. One is, what type of companies do you typically work with? I appreciate you sharing where data comes from, but I want to see it's aligned with my work, which is government. And I can tell you that we have done audits across the spectrum, including government, uh, federal, state, local government entities, as well as in various industries pretty much across the board. And I chose those metrics because they are very consistent in what we're seeing, regardless of the type of organization it is. And Alex asks, are there any metrics available that compares the effectiveness of email messages versus pull communications, web communications, news pages, etc.? Michael, what about that?
I don't, we don't, have direct measurement of, like say, intranet data. I do have just some anecdotal stories. I mean, one, we were working with Microsoft when Satya took over the CEO position, and one of the things he was doing was video town hall videos, and they were posting those direct to their intranet site, and they were unpleasantly surprised at the low viewership. And we worked with them. So during the live broadcast, they were cutting clips and feeding it through our email system, and we were kind of on standby to make sure there were no hiccups and everything was running smooth because they were sending out large volumes. But they were, I think it was, I forget, the numbers were like 1,000% or more than 1,000% increase in viewership once they added the email in there. So, um, you know,
Yeah,
the push definitely, employees need both, right? You need push and pull, but uh, push seems to go a little further.
yeah. Um, I would just add to that what we do, Alex, is we again look at the relationship there between those different channels. So we'll look at the effectiveness of email, and if the pull communications, we run into a lot of cases where the, the people want the intranet to be kind of the hub of the operation, which we think is a good idea. But um, if it's only pull, then you have to try to educate the audience, to go there to get their news. And this is, of course, where email comes in because you can create a push vehicle to send people to that channel. So we kind of look at the integration that way. People are taking the poll here, Michael, and one person asks, Our most effective channel is Viva Engage, internal social media, but there wasn't an option for that kind of internal comms on our little poll here. But I would say, Michael, that that is certainly coming up. More and more folks are starting to use
Yeah,
internal social media.
yeah, it's kind of I forget that Yammer is still a thing, even though they rebranded it, right? And for us, I see there's a lot of crossover that I see between what you get through Teams and what you get through uh, Viva Engage, formerly known as Yammer. Um, so yeah, depending on the type of audience, personally, I use both. I tend to, the type of work I do, I tend to myself use email more than Teams. I find that full-time chat messages just too disruptive for the type of concentrated work I tend to be focused on. But other people, our developers love it. They live in that kind of chat, social, real time, quick feedback between team members. So kind of depends on who the audience is.
Right. Well, here's we have the results here. So, um, as we might have predicted, Michael, email is still kind of, the go-to channel for a lot of communicators. Um, this is what we know. We know we can reach people. Email newsletters coming in a close second. Um, Intranets I think, are coming up. They used to score much lower than this. And then you see the other options there, including Teams channels and and video. Um, that we do have a question: how do videos fare as an effective communication tool? We're seeing a drop in viewership within 2.5 minutes, regardless if the video is 5 minutes or 15. That's you're absolutely right. And I mean, our advice on this, we look at a lot of videos that uh, you get, the average attention span on video is about 47 seconds. Sorry to say, um, but you can do a lot in 47 seconds, and you can really do a lot in a minute and a half to 2 minutes. So to be effective, I mean, some videos should be longer because they're telling a story, more like a a feature or a news report. But in terms of being a communication tool for people where you have leaders talking on video or something like that, the shorter is better, which means you got to write it very tightly and make it work in that much shorter framework. Um, Speaking of the go-to channels, I mean, again, here's another example. I mean, the thing that, I think strikes me about this is, again, emails, kind of dominate. But just, look at all the channels. I mean, there are just many, many channels that we have available. And that's not to say that we should get rid of them, but we do need to understand why they work or why they aren't working as we'd like, them to work. You see, back to the question, you see long form videos there, only kind of at the bottom of that poll.
Similar
Michael?
data here. Yep,
Yeah.
similar data here. We do an annual survey to communicators, and one thing we did notice this year is that the meetings, whether they're in person or online meetings, have kind of overtaken the intranet in terms of communicators' impressions of effectiveness. So that more personalized, direct communication is coming back.
Yeah, and that kind of, if you can go back to that for a moment, Michael, because that's we have an attendee asking about that. Surprised the town halls ranked low. They rank higher here, I think, on this chart. Um, and we have seen this as well, that town halls are on the upswing. Um, More people are attending them. Many of them are virtual. Um, and employees say, hey, I want to hear from the leaders. And they're very clear about what they want to hear from the leaders. Um, and how you set up a town hall, what should the content be? What kind of interactivity is there? So many town halls fail because, if you have everybody tuned in, if you're live or even if you're virtual, why are we all getting together? It should be two-way. Is there enough time for people to ask questions or for there to be more of a conversation? If it was just one way, then we wouldn't need to have a town hall. We'd just send out some messages. So I think what motivates people to want to be engaged in community, in company comms, is that they they know now from some experience, if they've come to this, that they're actually going to get some answers to their questions. It's not just about what, it's also about why. Employees really want to know why, and town halls are a great place to address those things. And then someone asked, do you think 400 to 500 attendees for a town hall is good if your total audience is 1,300? It seems pretty good to me, Michael. I mean, the
Yeah, I mean,
thing
if you can
about,
get what's that, roughly half, just about half. And
yeah,
yeah, and I don't know if that's virtual, in person. Sometimes it's a combination. Um, and a lot of people, depending on the company, right? You've got customer appointments or project deadlines. There's always, there's work going on too. So you got to balance that with how many people can actually attend. But getting over half to a live event seems good.
and we with our clients, we're always advising that town hall is about before, during, and after. So, what are you doing before to advertise it and get people to attend because of you're telling them what the agenda is, what the topics are, and maybe even gathering questions ahead of time. And during the town hall, as I mentioned, how do you set it up? What's the interactivity? What's the agenda that will keep people interested? But really important too is after the town hall. The event is usually recorded, so people who didn't attend could access it, but also there may be questions that don't get answered, and you use your other channels, particularly your intranet, to answer questions that you didn't get to during the town hall. That's a good example of the channels working together.
Yeah, that's a great thing about if you ran them in teams too, you can have that kind of ongoing chat conversation right alongside the recordings and gets it makes it almost live. So this just from terms of email being number one, this gives you some high level metrics like what are the top open rates, like when we work with customers, we want to get them in that 80% and higher. And then when it comes to readership, again, that's kind of 64% target. Um, getting, because otherwise, why are you writing content if people aren't reading it? And then when
Yeah,
we measure reach kind of beyond the open rate. So the open rate, like it basically measuring, did it get to someone's inbox? Most people, will at least open the email for a second as they're scrolling through their inbox, but they could immediately delete it. They could immediately move on to the next one. So that's why we focus more on attention rate. We have that ignore rate, which is that immediately moved on or immediately deleted. So we kind of back that out of the open rate, and that's our kind of attention. Did they give it any attention? Did they spend at least 3 seconds or more with the message? And then we have a timer that gets into various levels of readership from there, which is this chart. So kind of shows you the skim is under 30% of the content. A read is that it's that 30% threshold. If they get to half of it, that's the engaged read. So for a town hall meeting, you can consider the half that showed up engaged, right? Using this as a measure. But the interesting thing here is you can see roughly over a third or just about a third, right? Is the gray bar is how much content was produced, sent out, and the green bar is how much time people spent reading it.
Yeah, and Courtney, I hope that answers your question about the read rate. I think it's very interesting too that, that look at how much we're putting out there and then look how many people are, um, you know, over 30% of the time figured to read it. And beyond that, the sort of engaged readers. So it's a very good measure of, we're sending all this stuff out. Who's actually looking at it and are they spending the time with it?
Yeah, and we also have the engagement metric. So usually, clicks, likes, some sort of response is considered engagement. There's a lot of communications that go out that, they don't have a click. They don't necessarily have an action. It's more of a, need to know type communication. So we include readership as part of engagement, right? So for those readers that get over half way through the content, we're considering them engaged. That's the green bar. And then if they actually do something, click something that you ask them to do, then that would be the orange.
Yeah. Just a couple of other questions, Michael, that came in on the town halls. What is a good town hall attendance percentage for smaller engaged companies? Um, I mean, I would hope that to be, very high, but again, before, during, and after, there are always going to be people who, even though they're engaged, can't attend because they've got something else going on. But I would certainly look for 50% and above. And then someone else asked, how long is too long with bios, updates, et cetera? And I presume you mean for a town hall. And I think it's a really good question because I think we spend way too much time. This happens in presentations as well. People spend a lot of time, well, here's my background, here's my bio. I mean, it's important to know who's talking, but that that's not interesting to people. We can do that later or not do it at all or do it before the town hall. But, I think what we want to get to is, get to the news. What's happening? What are you telling us? The best town hall I ever saw was one in which, the leader came out and said, look, I've got some updates for you, and I'm going to take about 15 minutes to do that. And then I'm going to turn it over to this group of employees who have some presentations they're going to make about what they're doing. And we're going to have the Q&A, and then we're going to do some other business. So think about how you organize it. It doesn't have to be the traditional way where we talk and talk and talk and talk, and then the last 5 minutes. Hey, anybody have any questions? Um,
All right. Well, we
yeah,
kind of covered a lot of this, the kind of getting beyond the open rate metric, right? So you've got attention, measuring readership, clicks, and feedback. So that's all good. And then Jim, you guys see this in your audits too, the types of content and what works inside of an email?
right. And Edith asks, she says, I've been hearing a lot about channel fatigue. Can you comment about that? Should you focus on fewer channels? We hear this all the time, Edith. There is channel fatigue. We have so many channels, and communicators are very good at addition. We add new things, we add new content, we add new channels, but we never seem to take anything away. Subtraction is not our thing. So I think about, using the channels more effectively. So, email's a great channel, but does it have to be for everything? It shouldn't be for everything. In this, for example, this is given that we have all these other channels, email is great for news, timely news, information, you know, call to action, get me to do something. And we can do that for the global audience, or we can do it for, specific groups. But Michael pointed this out earlier. Emails need to be short. They need to be concise. Make every word, count. If there's more that people need to know, you can always link them to, expanded content. But you need to sort of get in and get out with email. Nice conversational tone doesn't have to be complicated or jargony. And in the writing of it, when we teach email writing, this should be very inverted pyramid style. The idea that you put the most important information at the top, don't delay, don't back into it, and then more details as you go through in case nobody reads the whole thing. And we can't assume that people are going to read everything we send them. So, particularly
Well,
with
we
email,
know for sure they read about a third of it, right? So
that's right. That's confirmed. So get it out there and get it done in the beginning.
yeah, and we do see kind of consolidation uh conversations and that happening. So it's kind of like the big three tend to be, email, meetings slash social chat, they're kind of all in one now. And then the intranet, you kind of have to have those. And then of course, if you do have factory workers or non-desk workers, you do need a channel to reach that audience. So if you can focus on those four, I think you're in great shape.
Yeah. Michael, we have a question that someone says, I've often seen link overload in emails. I know this is one of your favorite topics. How many links are too many?
Yeah, so I think we might have that chart. I don't remember if we have that chart in this one or if it was the last presentation, but um, we might get to it. But basically, anything more, you can kind of use that rule of seven. Like on our chart, like there's a peak once it goes. The more you add, the less total clicks you're going to get. Um, but anything more than six tends to be fruitless. Um, but
Yeah,
even when you put more links in the email, you don't actually get more total clicks. You get the most total clicks and the highest click-through rate when you only have one or two.
yeah. And to your previous slide too, someone asks about text versus, images. And, images are fine, but people are focused on the text, particularly if the text is something that connects with them. It doesn't, you where you can tell them what you're going to tell them, right away. Um, to your earlier point too, Michael, people do drop off. Here's some survey data. What do people do when they get email newsletters? There's a lot of skimming and scanning. That's going to happen regardless. So all the more reason to make those individual pieces in the email newsletter really tight, really compelling. I get email newsletters from, the Washington Post, the New York Times. And what do? I skim them. And when I see something I like, I click on it. It gives me a nice summary, but that's what people do. And they'll tell you, well, I don't really have time to read all of this. Or I decide it's not relevant to me. But the main thing is make it easy for people. Um, and let's talk about getting rid of stuff and consolidating. It seems that we're in a time where people are creating email newsletters in abundance and sending them out to people. Here's one survey that found, a third of the people were getting more than 10 email newsletters. That's just kind of crazy. That's just too much. Even if the information is something they care about, people say they throw up their hands. I can't keep up with all of that. I actually have to do work.
Yeah, we do have some customers that are using kind of, it used to be like if you're internal, like there's no opt-out option, right? But we are seeing some customers implement the subscription model for various newsletters. So people can sign up if they're interested or unsign up, opt out if they're not. The other thing we see often is, when communication teams get the complaint of, there's too much news, overloaded. The default reaction that we've seen is like, oh, we'll do a monthly, right? We'll put everything in monthly, so it's only one email, and that actually works against you, right? Because you end up with one really long email where the better strategy, the more effective strategy, is up your frequency and significantly reduce your content. So the news
Yeah.
is more timely and there's less of it and people can just move through it quickly.
Yeah. Someone asked if, they said, what about digital signage? We didn't have that on the list. And we do measure that. Digital signage can be terrific, particularly for the hard to reach. This is in on a factory floor, in a break room, somewhere where people can easily see it. But we see a lot of issues with digital signage, where it's placed so that people can read it, and particularly how it's written. But so many digital signage, there's too much copy on the screen, or it moves too quickly. These are the things you have to look at because these are billboards, and billboards need to be short.
Yeah, and this reinforces your comment before, Jim, about skimming newsletters, right? There's the data that we see is like for this analysis is we just look at newsletters that are in email, and you can see like the on compared to average, right? The readership is almost 11% lower on a newsletter.
Yeah.
And someone was asking, this is the distribution size, so this isn't the click one, but if you look at these charts, you'll just kind of see the lines as the audiences get bigger and bigger. The all the metrics, attention, readership,
Mm.
engagement, kind of fall. So that's the thing with I know a lot of leaders or anyone that does a newsletter internally thinks that it needs to go. Everyone needs to see this, right? But it's really the more focused the audience, the more relevant the content, the better people are going to receive it. So if you can really hone that audience down, you'll get better results.
Yeah. And even if it's targeted, which is, I think, a very important point, still has to be written well, still has to be tight. Those people still don't have a lot of time. So always think about that.
And this is the answer to that how many links is too many question, right?
Yeah,
So here
right.
we've got, you can see the link total links clicked is the bars, and the click rate, the percentage of people that actually clicked something, is the brighter orange bar, and that declines. The more links you put in there, the more that declines. But there's that nice little spike at 6. Um, and then, again, on when it's 1 or 2, you get the most total clicks. But that pretty much answers uh, how many links to put in your email.
Yeah. 20 is probably too many.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as the e-newsletters go, we've talked about some of this. I mean, I love dailies, just from my days of being a daily newspaper reporter, I guess. But if you're going to do a daily, it depends on the environment and what that daily is supposed to do. A lot of times it's like, okay, here are the 3 things you need to think about today. Weekly works really well because you can do kind of the same thing. Here's what's coming up for the week. But again, more than 5 or 6 items, I think you don't want to go beyond that. And the problem with e-newsletters that come out, monthly is you've got way too much stuff. So I'd rather it come out more often with fewer items. We like the image, headline, and teaser, all a link setup with it looks good, strong headlines, um, and we hear a lot in audits. People want to know, what do I need to know versus what would be nice to know. I care about the nice to know stuff, but first and foremost, I need to know what do I need to know? What do I need to do?
All right.
Intranets very similar. That how often do people go there? We're trying to Companies are trying to get their intranets to be the sort of, as I said, the sort of hub of communications. We think that's a good idea too. But like the chart on the left, a third of the people almost never go to the intranet. People primarily, how intranets came into being was they went there to do stuff, tasks, get things, connect with their benefits or what have you, or storage. But now they're becoming real communication hubs. And so we need to drive people there. They're not necessarily going to just work as pull vehicles. Um, and what about that homepage? We need to a lot of good data there on what we need to do to get people to come over. Um, Create a homepage that is compelling. People come there to do stuff, but they can also come there to read stuff or check a calendar or watch a video. make it easy for them to move around. We love strong images on the homepage. We love the photo of the week feature. People like to look at photos, particularly if they're interesting photos from around the enterprise. Some of them have scrolls at the top. And then once you're sending people there for longer form content, those stories are on their own landing pages, on inside pages on the intranet, and there you can package it like a magazine story.
All right. Now we got leadership communication.
Yeah, CEOs uh, generally get a lot of attention. I think, Michael, that people pay attention if it's coming from the CEO or if it's the CEO at a town hall. Um, People pay attention to this. Only about a fourth of the people surveyed in this one don't read them, and the ratings on them are pretty high. They consider them, trustworthy and clear. So that's good for a CEO message.
Yeah, we see that in the email too. We look at, what the from address is. That's one of the key filters people use to decide what they're going to pay attention to in their inbox. And when it's from a person, most communications, the big gray bar, right, is shared mailboxes. Most communications are going out, communications at, HR at, what have you. But when it comes from a person who isn't the communicator, so usually that means it's a leader, you're going to see 7% higher attention there. And then when we look at, what are the metrics look like for those CEO communications, you can see right off the bat, 15% higher attention than average, 15%, nearly 16% higher readership than
Mm,
average. So they people pay attention to the boss.
they do, and they'll open an email because it's from the boss. Um, Again, CEO, messages in email, make it clear who it's from, but you can do it any number of ways. A short video, a tightly written piece, a Teams channel, a podcast. We're starting to see much better podcasting internally. And again, it's the CEO, so it's authoritative, but we want the CEO to be conversational, to connect with people, not a lot of jargon and no long talking heads on video. Quickly on the question side, Michael, Daniela says, "Do you have an example of a great email newsletter?" And I certainly do, Danielle. And if you email me, I can send you some examples. Um, Someone else says, "How many articles in a company email newsletter is acceptable?" I think we talked about that a little bit, 4 to 6 items. Other than that, to Michael's point, it starts to get a little long, too many links and too long. People don't get to the bottom. That Georgie, that maybe answers your question as well. A template is a good idea, by the way. Design it, make it look like like something that people expect to get. And the last question about how do we measure digital signage, Michael? The person says haven't cracked a good metric, and that is a good question because how do we know that if people aren't clicking on anything? I think
Yeah, you need those new monitors that are watching back.
yeah, that would work, and you got to go ask them. I mean, I think that if you have these in a factory, for example, a manufacturing plant, got to get people together and say, hey, do you pay attention to this? And let's actually look through them. Tell me what you remember and what you don't. And somebody will
Yeah, it
say, well,
seems like a
they're
perfect environment for a clipboard, standing next to a sign and just asking walkers by,
yeah,
like,
it's a great focus group.
yeah. One thing on the one comment on the leadership messages that we hear often is just the quest for authenticity, right? No one wants uh,
Right.
the CEO to do. They know if it's public, there has to be some PR speak, right? There's like someone's putting words in their mouth sometimes, but usually when it's employee communications, they're looking for authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. Managers, again, this is something that we see in so many audits where communication kind of gets stuck in the middle. And so we ask the managers this as part of the audit side of it. Do you have a good understanding of the strategy? They seem to, but many say they would like more training to be a better communicator. And the big question is, are you getting what you need to keep your direct reports properly informed? It's not just the managers failing to share things with the employees. It's also, are you getting what you need from leadership? And the other question that comes up all the time is, do you have access to the leaders to go back to them and say, well, I delivered these messages, but there were questions, and here they are. And that's part of, if we go to the next slide, Michael, yeah, what works best. Um, Managers are incredibly thankful for any kind of a channel or a managers only e-newsletter that is very clearly, here's what you need to tell people. Here's what you need to do. We've done a number of these, and the managers are quite appreciative because their managers are doing a lot and they need help from communicators. And then that last point about the two-way feedback loop. How do we allow managers to report back up the chain? Talk to a lot of senior leaders about this, and they're like, yeah, we don't really hear back from them, and we need to create a space, maybe in our leadership meetings or some other means, where we can say to managers, okay, well, what are people saying out there? People have asked about video. People love video. This was video was thought to be the solution to all of life's problems. Turns out not so much, but it's good. Video's good, but it's got to be short. People just are not going to stick long unless it's that kind of a feature video. But as a message tool, keep it short. Um, make it stand alone. It should have its own headline to get your attention. It should have its own caption to tell you a little bit more. Really good for executive messaging. And then the Teams channels, I think this is, we're learning more about this all the time, but this is kind of a mixed bag. People either love Teams or are frustrated by it. And I think this is going to sort itself out over time. But a lot of people say, well, it's good, but it's sort of overwhelming. Um, it's good, but I can't search for anything. And everybody's starting a channel. So I'm having trouble keeping up with everything.
Yeah, currently it's a high noise, low signal environment currently, most cases.
Yeah. I think just specific channels, and some governance around how many channels. Right now, it's just like anybody can create a channel in many organizations. That's just too much stuff. But for specific things like leadership messages, like managers, and then use your e-newsletters and and the team's homepage. What's new? What's new on the site? Give me the headlines and let me click through to those channels to see what's going on. And then finally, we ask a lot of times about the integration. Are they working together? And generally, the word is not so much, and they could be better. In the graph on the left, it's 40% of the respondees to these are surveys, by the way, for people who are asking, um, say that we're not working together. Um, and the audience says, we not sure what type of information is in which channel. That needs to be really clear. Um, and I mentioned this before, the difference between need to know and nice to know. Is that clear? That comes up a lot in our focus groups. I need to be able to sort through all this stuff you're sending me and make sure that I know the need to know stuff. And then I maybe have a little more time to go back and look at some of the nice to know.
All right, so we can wrap it up right
Yeah.
on schedule and then take any final questions.
Yeah, and just, like we said at the front, you got to listen, you got to go talk to the audience. I mean, it's the best way to, I mean, we love surveys are good because you get data. We love focus groups because people really open up and tell you how they're using the channels or what they need. The metrics, as Michael's pointed out, we got to get beyond those, kind of first level metrics, um, to look at things like reading and watching, taking action. And then, in my area is mostly on the, content and storytelling. The writing can just be a lot better. It's not where it should be. We need better headlines. We need compelling subject lines. And we need good copy. I mean, you've got to spend more time. I know it's internal, um, but we need to spend the kind of time that we spend on external communication on internal comms.
And edit ruthlessly, right? Looks like it's keep it as concise as possible.
Edit ruthlessly is a good way to put it.
And
Selena says, I send out a weekly newsletter with about 4 to 10 stories. We don't store articles on the internet, keep the full content within the newsletter. Well, Selena, I would change that. I think first of all, I think archiving the weeklies it would be good. People can go back and look. But also, I think the articles, send them to the intranet and keep the content there. The weekly newsletter ought to be, you know, teasers. Give me a good headline and a good, teaser or subhead that tells me why I should click through and be interested in this, and make it fast. Um,
yeah, so
because
make
we
it
don't,
skimmable. Like I
yeah,
think LinkedIn does some newsletters that are good models because they're text only, but it's headline, kind of one or maybe two sentences of what you need to know, and then it's then a link, and then it's off to the next one, so people can skim that. I would imagine if you're sending, 4 to 10 stories, most people are getting through, a third of, so maybe your top two
yeah,
stories, and then
yeah,
or they're scrolling through trying to find something interesting. So, and a lot of time we used to see that a lot before, when intranets, SharePoint was the number one, and it wasn't the easiest to post articles on. It's some people have easy to use intranets or nice SharePoint layers that have been designed to support communications. Other companies don't, and it's really easy to email is way easier if you don't have a great way to post articles. So um,
yeah, yeah. Good point. This is a good way to kind of wrap up here. Somebody saying, what motivates employees? Free food? Well, free food always motivates
that's the
employees.
only way I can get everyone back in the office is to
Yeah,
feed.
prizes. How do we get them to read, click, ask questions, and so forth? And I think the idea is this gets back to the integration. Some people want to read, some people want to watch, some people, like to just go through their emails, others want to go on Teams or these other. So there has to be enough variety out there so that you get them one way or the other. But a lot of it comes down to, good writing. The headlines are advertisements for your content. Always think of them that way. That's you're enticing people. Think magazine covers in the grocery store when you go by the newsstand. You're trying to get people in, and you really have to be really good writers of that, um, kind of information. Um, and again, you've got, good open rates, as one person on here says, that's good. People are clicking. But to Michael's point, are they reading, and are they reading in an engaged way? Those are the metrics you really want to look at.
Yeah, an interesting thing on open rates too is like you'd think that it would be uh, you know, apples and apples, everyone measures open rates the same way, and it's completely not, right? It's nowadays, Apple mail privacy protection, the spam filters, link protection, all those things are triggering open actions when a person isn't even there. So you can get a really high open rate, like We get customers sometimes from competitors that like, what, I'm concerned about my 120% open rate. And it's like, well, you should be, because that's there's a lot of fake, there's a lot of not real opens in there. So you do have to know how those opens are being calculated and what's being filtered out and what isn't. And the assumption is always a person looked at this email, but that's nowadays with all the security stuff for email, it's not often the case.
Yeah. That's like the voter rolls here in Chicago in the old days, when 120% people vote early and often. That was always the rub on Chicago. Anyway, Michael, thank you. I know, boy, we burned through that. There's a lot there. People are going to you'll get the presentation. Please think about whether you want to pursue this conversation with us. We're offering a free 30-minute session to talk about any of these things and as they apply to your own work. So, Michael, thanks for having me.
All right, and we'll be meeting again the end of March, and we will talk about how to measure employee sentiment and get a sense of what employees are thinking about thinking and feeling about various topics.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.